Bolliger and Mabillard is one of the most successful roller coaster manufacturers, with their coasters being super reliable and giving smooth rides. Out of the 124 coasters built by B&M, I have ridden 35 of them and will be ranking up my top 15. Without any further ado, let's hop into the list. Kicking off the list is our only B&M flyer on the list, Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. Manta is a ride that is okay in most rows, but what makes it amazing is the pretzel loop in the back row. While it's not the largest element, it gives some bizarre positive G-forces, and the dive headfirst is really trippy. The rest of the ride stays pretty high off the ground, giving amazing visuals, and some of the rolls and drops are pretty forceful. Also, some of the effects were absolutely done geniusly by SeaWorld Orlando, making you feel like you're about to touch the water. Overall, this is an amazing coaster. Number 14 is the first of many inverts on this list, Talon at Dorney Park. This coaster demonstrates one of the key features you'll see on this list, and that is copy and paste elements. B&M often incorporates the same elements on many of their rides, such as the vertical loop or zero-G roll, but the thing about it is that they do it really good. This coaster packs up good punch for not being a stat monster, and the low to the ground second half is very intense and a masterful design by B&M. Overall, this coaster is a very intense ride, and it's one of the best at Dorney Park in my opinion. The first Giga coaster on the list comes at number 13, which is Orion at Kings Island. This ride has a drop that will send you falling forever in the back rows, and the wave turn is fun, but the problem with Orion is the loss of momentum. The reverse treble clef sucks the life out of the pacing, and while it seems to recover with good airtime after, it doesn't feel the same as other Gigas. Giga coasters are meant to have a sensation of speed, and Orion feels more like a hyper with the big hills. These hills are very good, giving solid flowjector airtime, and the Helix even has a solid gray out. It's not the best Giga out there, but Orion does its job fine and is a very fun ride. Staying at Kings Island, number 12 is Banshee. I hear many complaints about roughness on this coaster, and I don't seem to understand it as the most I noticed was a small rattle. This coaster also has a different approach than most of the old school inverts, focusing on a graceful ride with the vest restraints. The drop is a top 3 drop on an invert in my opinion, and the pretzel knot is insane and delivers stellar positives. Banshee also finishes off with a hang-time filled roll for the cherry on top, making it a well-rounded ride. Our first B&M Hyper shows up at number 11, which is Intimidator. If I did this list a year ago, then you wouldn't see it nearly as high, but I noticed that the trims don't hit as much this year, or I've just gotten very lucky. The ride also has some great whip from the staggered seating design, and even in the front row, there is solid airtime on the camelbacks. If the second half had more to it, or wasn't trimmed as much, then I would put Intimidator higher, but the final Helix is done at a snail's pace, and it doesn't have that final bang that other coasters have, such as Diamondback with the splashdown. Starting out the top 10 is yet another Hyper, this one being Candemonium at Hershey Park. Candy is very similar to Mako at SeaWorld Orlando, but toned down a bit, with a shorter layout but still great sustained airtime on the camelbacks. The second half is fun and unique for a B&M Hyper, but it doesn't deliver in terms of forces. Also, the trims on this ride can hit really hard, making for not the most enjoyable ride experience, but it's still a good Hyper nonetheless, and gives great airtime. Number 9 is another Hyper coaster, this one being Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. This coaster has the best drop of any B&M, and maybe even the best out of every coaster I've ridden, as it pulls you out of your seat in the back row with no time to think about it, and the pre-drop builds even more speed for it. The rest of the ride also has some good airtime moments, but the twister layout also allows for some rare laterals. Now it doesn't have the most airtime out of any coaster, but the airtime moments that it has is really strong, and that's why I rank it high. Moving back to the inverts, number 8 is Raptor at Cedar Point. This is one of the most iconic coasters, but does it live up to the hype? I had some bad rides 2 years ago where the mid-course killed the second half, but last year it fared much better and the second half was bone-crushing. The first half also is very solid with intense positives throughout and a killer drop. Before we continue with the video, I'd like to remind you to subscribe, as it's completely free, and every 10 subscribers I gain in the next month equates to a ride on Hurler, one of my least favorite coasters. Now, let's jump into number 7, which is Afterburn at Carowinds. This coaster is relentless, not letting up its momentum until the ending segment, and having some insane positives in the trenches of inversions. Along with that, the Batwing will make your spine tingle, and while it isn't as good as Montu's, it still delivers. After the Batwing is an airtime hill that gives you the break that is much needed. And while some inverts just keep going on with the elements, I like this break on Afterburn, considering it throws you right down into a corkscrew and intense helix before hitting the brake run. This is an amazing coaster overall, and one of my favorite inverts. Number 6 is my second highest ranked invert, Alpengeist at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. This has all of the qualities of the previous inverted coasters, but is by far the largest, coming in at a whopping height of 195 feet tall, meaning that the drop is long and sustained. In the back row, you also receive a lethal dose of whip. The cobra roll over the water is a crazy element, and while a bit uncomfortable in some spots, the whip and positives totally make up for it. The second half isn't the best, but if the trims slow you down, then you at least get some great hang time on the inversions. To start off the top 5, we go to Georgia for Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia. From the surface, this seems like a normal hyper with good airtime, but it is the most intense one, giving crazy positives between hills and during the helix turnaround. This ride also has 9 rows, which leads to more whip in the last row, and even in the front, the airtime is sustained. The final run of hills is also, unlike any other hyper, absolutely launching you into space. The highest ranked invert on this list without a doubt is Montu at Busch Gardens Tampa. This is one of the most intense coasters out there, focusing on sheer positive G-forces and whip, especially in the back row. This is a ride that is really hard to re-ride, as you almost always need to take a break and sit down after a ride to gain full consciousness back. The first 3 inversions all deliver like other inverts, and the Batwing after is the best inversion on a B&M coaster, pretty much leaving your sanity in the trench if you had it before you got on this ride. Montu doesn't slow down going after the mid-course, going through fun trenches and ending with 2 more insane corkscrews. This is an absurd coaster, and it definitely deserves to be in the top 5 of this list. Taking the bronze medal is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. This coaster never fails to deliver in the airtime department, with all of the sustained airtime hills that Mako has. Along with that, the setting is done perfectly as you skim across a lake throughout the ride. The ride also has some crazy flowjector moments, including the speed hill before hitting the mid-course brakes, and the mid-course brakes really don't slow down the ride, leading to a great second half. The second half isn't entirely airtime, focused on some high banking turns and a dive over another lake, and it perfectly ends a great coaster. Now, if only Mako had a splashdown element like our number 2 coaster, Diamondback at Kings Island. This is the king of B&M hypers with the staggered seating for more whip, almost every hill having no trims, and did I mention the splashdown? The ride also has some other great forces throughout the ride, including some good positives, but it nails the most important part of a hyper, and that's why it's in the top 3. And to probably no one's surprise, the number 1 coaster on this list is Fury 325 at Carowinds. Fury is a pure speed demon of a coaster, featuring low-to-the-ground turns over the entrance of the park, making for great visuals off and on ride. The ride also doesn't forget airtime, as the first drop does wonders in the back row, and the treble clef is solid sideways flowjector airtime, which is weird to experience on a B&M. The ride continues with more airtime hills and a scary head chopper to end the insane experience that is Fury 325. Whether you're a coaster enthusiast or scared of roller coasters, it's impossible to not be amazed by the sheer power of this ride. And no, I'm not being home park biased here. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and subscribe to see my demise on Hurler in a month. This is Zero G Coaster signing out. Have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next train.